So I think, Nivi, do you want to do the kickoff just to give some context around this? So,
sure. Yeah, I will do that. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Adaptivist team for enabling us to have this demo. We've been trying to structure this demo for a while, and what we have built with the Adaptivist team, I want to emphasize, is the initial phase of how we want to use our Jira platform. And I say it's like a platform because this first phase that we're building out is something that we would like to incorporate what Eva has envisioned for PMO. And this is a phase one of what we currently are operating. So you will see all the functionalities that we do day to day translated, but it has not been full-fledged, meaning not complete engineering integration will be demoed in this, but all the process and the intake of how we do day to day in Jira will be captured. So anything that is specifically on individual CI workflow will be a following phase. So what we'll be seeing is just how to do the day-to-day release process and everything that captures the release process. And Eva, go ahead and add anything I missed. But that's really from a tooling perspective.
That sounds great. Thank you, Nive. So yeah, so as Nive is saying, this is our phase one. I think up until now, we did do a smaller interim solution so that we could, as the teams and the trains are now working in the safe methodology, that we can have some way to at least organize the work. This is taking that very much to the next level, but considering where we are with the timing, we want to get that in place in time for the next PI, which is January 13th for brand experience going first. So considering that, what we're showing today is showing that next level, and what we want to make sure is that that the teams and the trains understand how it's set up, to show how we can start to then get the work populated and ready in time for January 13th, to answer any questions about the setup, to answer any questions about certain capabilities that we might be looking for at the start. If we identify anything that we don't have in phase one, very likely we're going to be looking at that as a later phase. And seeing how we roll that in, but this is essentially the next step in incrementally getting ourselves set up more and more in the space that we want.
Eva, you're cutting out.
Did you hear what I said just before, or can you hear me now?
Now we can, but we did not for a few seconds there.
Oh, okay. What should I read?
I think you're saying for a few, and then it became choppy.
Okay, so I think what I was saying was, this is our phase one. We want to make sure that we're going to give the demo. We want to make sure that the trains and the teams are being pulled in now to understand how we are going to get set up for the next PI, answer any questions on how things will be structured and perhaps some functionality that you're looking for. And if we identify anything big where we want to look to include that, I think we're going to look to put that into our transformation backlog and the tooling side of things and see how we can incrementally get that in there. And just to note, the other part of that is that we're really focused on a very streamlined and easy change management here. So it's going to be more around how we will make some changes within the projects and what we have now to pull into the views that we need versus having a lot of rework. And it can be done team by team, train by train. Okay.
So I think most everybody. So from our end, Nick is going to be driving the demo. We have the in the time as well, but he'll be the one driving. As questions come up, I'll try to, if it gets so crazy, I'll feed him questions and so forth, but he'll probably be the one doing most of the discussion and so forth. Okay. So Nick, I'll let you kind of pick it up.
All right, thanks so much, William. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. Let me know once you guys can see it.
We're good?
All right. Well, thank you guys again for having me today. As William said, my name's Nick. My last name, Nick Bialashevsky. I'm based out in Montana, so quite a bit of ways from you guys. Yeah, gonna basically walk through the same demo that I did last week. So there might be some folks in the room who saw this demo last week. I'm basically gonna go ahead and show you a very flexible, safe solution for Atlassian Jira software. Basically, this is a solution that we've developed about a year ago using a couple of marketplace add-ons as well as Adaptivist product script runner for Jira. So what I'm going to show you guys today is basically how it's configured, how it's set up. I'll explain, what will the impact be, positively to any of the teams that are currently using Jira to manage their projects, what kind of capabilities it offers you in terms of just general kind of getting a visualization of what's going on with your product, what's going on with your engineering, and then, how do you actually manage things like program increments, how do you manage things like your features. I do intend, even though this is a bit of a formal demo, I know we do have a lot of people, I do like to encourage as much as possible, if you do have some kind of a question, please feel free to interrupt me. It's not going to hurt my feelings or anything like that. If you have some kind of a scenario or a question or something that's not quite clear, please speak up. I'd love to either address that right in the middle of the demo, or maybe use that to inform where we go with the demo, or we could always parking lot it. But by all means, don't pass up a chance to ask a question if you do have one. So what I'll do first is I'll give you guys kind of a quick breakdown of what the solution consists of, and then I'll start walking you through how it actually looks. So really, the prerequisite to use this is obviously you have to be using Jira software. The apps that we are using on top of Jira software, one you can see right now in front of you, this is actually called Structure. This is made by a company called ALMworks. And then there are a couple of other add-ons that we use from a company called Easy Agile. Probably already used them or probably heard of them. The most prescient one that we're going to talk about today is going to be Easy Agile Programs, which allows you to define program increments and actually plot your features out on a timeline, and then conflate those with the actual Agile teams that make up your program or your Agile release train, and then you can map those things out and work with how you're doing your development. By and large, everything that we've implemented here is what you could consider stock or off-the-shelf Jira. We've tried as much as possible to come up with some kind of a robust solution for Jira software that wouldn't require a ridiculous amount of third-party add-ons. We also wanted to make sure that the user experience is really consistent and that as much as possible was canonical with how Jira was intended to be used. So what we've done to make this possible is we've implemented a couple of custom issue types inside of Jira. One is called a portfolio epic, and this will be used to represent things at the portfolio level. We also have capabilities that if you have an optional large solution layer inside of your safe configuration, you could also use capabilities to break down a very large solution into more and more features. And then you've also got the standard feature. Instead of actually creating a custom issue type for feature, we're actually leveraging Jira's epics because the functionality around epics inside of Jira behaves identically to how we'd like to use our features. So all of the stuff that's safe specific really just sits on top of your Agile projects. So I will end up going in and showing you how these things are set up. But in short, the Agile teams continue to work in their own Agile project. They can have their own workflow. They can have their own screens. They can have their own project roles. They can have their own preferences for how they get notified. But the only thing that they need to do in order to make this work is that their stories inside their individual team projects must be linked to an epic that lives in the program project for your safe program. So that's going to be the one change that any team would have to make. If they're currently using their epics inside of their project, they'll just have to move those epics to another project. So a minimal impact, but still an impact. As of last week, I believe I understand that you guys are already keeping your epics consolidated into a single project. So this could potentially be a totally immaterial impact to any of the other teams. So I'll jump into what we're kind of looking at right here. This is the safe portfolio structure. So this is actually just a single structure. We're actually working to improve this solution, and what we're going to do is add in some additional structures that give you different views of your product and your engineering. Oh, and I see a question from William. Why don't I pause real quick?
Hi. So are the teams would no longer be using Epics, right? It would only be used at the program or portfolio level?
Yeah, I guess you could say they'd, quote, no longer use them in terms of they wouldn't want to use them necessarily within their own project. They would be using the Epic to represent a feature, and then any stories that are used to implement that feature would be mapped to that, quote unquote, Epic.
Potentially a separate project.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
so they're still there. They're just in a different project as opposed to being in the same team level project. They're going to be in a program level project. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like best practice, well, going forward, the teams really shouldn't be using Epics in their their product team level.
Correct. Right. So they're not defining new epics necessarily, because from a
They should be.
yeah, those are being kind of handed down to,
Yeah,
at the train level.
The
Yeah.
teams use them right now to organize their backlogs, so we just need to figure out a different way for organization across products. But or what?
Okay.
Yeah.
Cannot use it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't need it everything to grow to feature.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all or nothing.
Perfect. Okay, so the safe portfolio structure that we're taking a look at right here is intended to be a hierarchical breakdown of your overall portfolio and strategy down to the actual implementation details of what you're doing. And I would like to stress too that there are as many ways to use structure as there are users of structure. So I wouldn't say that this is the only way or even the correct way to basically implement this structure. This is just one to show you kind of what's possible. If we look at this as kind of like, I'd like to see a breakdown of my portfolio and my strategic themes, all of my portfolio epics, optionally any capabilities, and then my features, and then the stories. So a view like this would actually break everything down and allow you to see everything here. So you can also collapse these completely, and you can drill down individually into the layers, or you can just look at everything kind of blown out the way I have it. You can also configure what columns are displayed here. So if there is different information you'd like to see, such as if there were dependencies between these issues, I can actually display a list of any issues that are dependent on this also in here. The status that you're seeing, this actually reflects the workflow status inside the project relative to the issue. The grain of this table is everything you see here is an issue, with exception of anything that has a page icon. This is actually Confluence content. I'll click on that in a second and show you how that works. But by and large, you can get any type of view you need. So some other potential structures that you could do is say, show me all of the features within a particular portfolio epic, and show me all of the stories broken down by team and then by sprint. Or maybe show me all of the stories broken down by program increment and then by sprint. Or show me everything that's in the current program increment that is meant to be released in version 1.5. You could do a huge number of these different types of things to get whatever view is most important to you. And the nice thing too is that these are actually really easy to build, and they contain a lot of automation. So you can actually add in things like filters and groupings. For instance too, if I wanted to show dependencies, I can show linkages. There's a lot of cool things that we can do with this that make it pretty powerful for viewing and visualizing. If I show you also quickly what we have in terms of the projects, I'll start actually at the team level, just to show you if I had a basic generic Agile team that had, here's their Agile board, they've got some sprints here, and then they've got things inside of their backlog. So if I go ahead and I take a couple of user stories and I go ahead and plot them into sprints, this is just like any team would normally manage their own backlog. And if there's anybody in the room by chance that didn't know that you could right-click on issues and move them to a sprint, you're in good company, because I didn't know that until about 2 weeks ago. And I think it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I'm using it in all of my demos now. But hopefully that will help some product managers manage your backlog a little bit more efficiently going forward. So anyway, what I just intend to show here is that if you guys are looking at this and saying, what's the impact to me going to be? If you're already using an Agile project and you've already got your own workflow, you've already got your backlog prioritized, and you've got things set up the way you like them, chances are you're not going to have to change anything. You'll be able to manage your board the way you've always liked to. You'll be able to basically do everything the same way you always have, except for all of these stories here are now considered at the team level of safe. And if they belong to an epic, the epic that they belong to will actually belong to the program level project. So just if we were looking at kind of the safe big picture, you've got the team level, you got the program level, and then we'll forget about the large solution level, and then we'll talk about the portfolio level. So at the team level, you've got, oh yes, I'm sorry.
So there was a question earlier about being able to organize the backlog via the epics at the team level. And so if you click on that epic link right now, I don't, on the left-hand side, I don't think you have the epics mapped to the board. But it is possible for you to pull those epics into the board filter, and then you'd still be able to drag and drop those issues to those epics, even though they're not in the same JIRA project.
Yeah, the team level, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that is very
Yeah,
cool.
links.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Nava. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie. So yeah, at the team level, you know, teams are free to have stories, bugs, tasks, subtasks of any type that they want. I think I also understand that you guys use custom issue types as well to track some of your CI/CD and testing activities. So those things as well could stay in there. They would not impact anything related to SAFE, and you guys could continue to manage that however you want. The most important thing I would say to be cognizant of, and I think that you guys are already trying to do this since you're along in your SAFE journey, is as much as possible, teams should have at least workflows that canonically make sense for the organization, and that you guys can at least, you know, point to any particular status used in a workflow and say that yes, this represents work that's not started, this represents work that's done, or this represents work that's in progress. As long as you're able to tell that, you'll be able to roll up and use the status reports in any way that you need to. Shifting quickly to the program level project. The program level and the portfolio level inside of this are going to very closely match what's in SAFE 4.6. So the board that you see here, this is a Kanban board. Everything that is listed on this board is a feature. The actual underlying issue type is Epic inside of JIRA. The workflow is program Kanban or solution Kanban. This is basically just coming straight from SAFE. You could feel free to tailor this however you'd like. This is just a pretty good starting point. And just like any normal JIRA board, you can use this to move things around. Same thing goes for the portfolio level project. Let's see here. Where did that go?
The port.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, there it is. I can't read today. So if I go to the Kanban board, you can see here we've got portfolio Kanban set up as the workflow for this. It's just a one-to-one mapping between all of the workflow statuses and the columns on our board here. And then all of the portfolio epics are just showing up. If I dive into any one of these, we've got some good stuff going on here. We've implemented custom fields like user business value, time criticality, risk reduction. Those are what we can use to calculate cost of delay in WSJF. You can add any other additional custom fields if there are different things that you guys like to track with regard to lean budgeting or anything that you track on your actual portfolio epics. Those could also be added to this as you see fit. Additionally, too, since we have Confluence as part of our solution, all of these actual stories and portfolio epics and features can also have a counterpart Confluence page. So if I kind of introduce the Confluence aspect by starting here with the portfolio at the top of the hierarchy, we set up Confluence so that it's actually got a space dedicated to a portfolio, and you can actually set it up too so that you have multiple discrete portfolios in there. So if you wanted one for web products or you wanted one for mobile products, you know, it being 2019, it's probably not a great idea to separate those. But if you did want to do that, that's an example of how you could separate those and put them together. So the whole idea behind putting the content inside of Confluence is that this can be a living collaborative document where you can do the basic things like highlighting text, and you can do comments. You know, you You can mention people. It's very, very nice to be able to throw visuals and other things that you're doing right on there. So we've actually templatized everything. So creating a new portfolio is as simple as clicking a button and it'll create a brand new page from that template. Everything also follows the hierarchy that we're using inside of Jira, right inside this Confluence space. So you'll be able to go to a particular space, look at a list of all of your portfolios, and then once you select a portfolio like this one, you'll be able to see all of its strategic themes. If you click on any of the strategic themes, you'll be able to actually see a page for that, and you can collaborate on that. And then below that would be its portfolio epics, any of its capabilities, any of its features, and any of its stories. So this is a great way if you guys, sometimes it's a requirement for regulation or for auditing to be able to show some of the work that went into your design, or maybe you guys just like to do that as a practice as an organization. You guys like to do, maybe semi-formal design or even just informal design, but you could leverage Script Runner or any kind of automation with Jira to actually create these pages for you whenever you have, portfolio epics or features or stories created to automatically give people a place to do their design work and keep it all in one spot. So anyway, that's part of the Confluence piece. Also, I should note too that any issue that you see here inside the structure is clickable. So if this is how you like to navigate your project, this is one way to do it. I should also add too that depending on how your organization likes to do it, you could set up your epics or you could set up your stories so that you can plan things, either dependencies or releases at either the feature or at the story level. So for instance, if you wanted to be able to go and say, show me all of the features slated to be included in, X.Y release, or show me which parts of every feature are going to be included in these releases. Or if you wanted to be able to assign a feature to a particular team within an art, or you wanted to assign the feature to the entire art, you could do that as well. I'm not going to get philosophical on, if there's a best way or not a best way, just trying to highlight the flexibility of the solution that's here. So this really covers the basic setup. Talked about the team level. Basically, teams are just agile as usual. You've got the program level, which contains all of your features, and that's where you can manage those things. And then you've got also a portfolio layer that you can link the features to. So that's how you can get the drill down between all of these things. The next big piece to this is actually, how does this all work operationally? So whenever we think about PI planning, how do we actually start to put all of this stuff together? And this is where the Easy Agile add-on comes in. And this actually really lives underneath the boards menu. So if you go to boards and go to view all programs, we're going to go in here and we're actually going to do our initial setup of this program or this Agile release train. So you can create any number of these. This is actually a pretty cool add-on. You can basically set it up so that folks that aren't doing SAFe don't even have access to this add-on if that's important to you. If I go ahead and set this up, we'll just call this Art 1. This is not exactly the most high fidelity solution for defining PI objectives, but this is actually the mechanism that they currently provide for defining your PI objectives for this art. And then the next thing that we do is we select what are the actual teams and what are their boards that are going to make up this art. So I've got, actually I think I put it as safe. Team 1, maybe. There we go. Team 1. I made it nice and easy on myself. Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, and Team 4. All right, so these are going to be the 4 teams that make up this Agile release train. So what I'm telling the product here is that this board contains sprints, and it contains stories, and it contains bugs, and it contains historical velocity information and everything that I want to make a part of this Agile release train. So I bring those into scope, and then the next thing I need to do is, since the features, the actual epics that these stories belong to in these boards don't live there, I need to bring them into the art by telling it that I have a dedicated Agile board for my program roadmap. So I select that guy, and that allows me to select my safe program board. So I'm going to select that, and now I tell it this will be the board that contains all of the epics that we're going to be using to plan out our features. I create the program, and it's going to ask me right away if I want to create a new program increment. So this is where I can go and say, we'll call this PI1. Oh, I apologize. This is actually where you define the low fidelity PI objectives. You can set your start date to be whatever you want. They've got these kind of backwards, but it tells you, do you want to do 2-week sprints? Do you want to do 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks? And then how many of them do you want to do? Pretty standard. I'll just leave it at 5 2-week sprints starting today on the 17th. And when I go ahead and create the increment, it's going to block off this amount of time on this linear calendar here. And just for fun, I'll create another increment that's going to butt up against this, and we'll call it PI2. It's automatically going to calculate our date, and then it's going to leave that here. So this is basically our starting point. You know, it'd be nice if you start out at the beginning of the year, you could define roughly what you think your PIs are going to be, go ahead and plot them out here, and then bam, you've got a single source of truth for that. And then the next part of this is actually going to be going in to edit the roadmap for this, and we're going to take all of the features that came over from our program board, and we're going to plot them out into these columns on the left-hand side. So the columns on the left-hand side, each date is representative of the start date of a sprint. So since we started our first 2-week sprint on the 17th, the next one will fall on the 31st, and so on and so forth. So it is implied that the 5th sprint here is your inspect and adapt sprint, so you can optionally assign features to it if you want to. So this is actually really fun. If you have a whole bunch of features, you can do a bit of a filter here and type. But since we don't have a whole bunch, I'll just bring these in. If you guys are reading any of these features and wondering what these are, this is actually from our SAFE white paper from earlier this year, where we put together a fictional foundation called Beasts Belong. And we developed a program for them where they have a set of mobile apps and a web application, you know, where they're basically trying to increase donations and things like that. So we did actually try to make this a pretty good and pretty readable example. So we'll bring in a couple of these features and see how they make sense. So payment administration is pretty important. We'll probably need that before we do some other things regarding payments. So we'll go ahead and we'll put in our donate feature after that, and then we'll put in another one for a different platform at the same time. And then we'll also bring in a couple of parallel ones that aren't necessarily overlapping with that. So it's pretty nice. You can see you can drag these things around. You can also change the order. So if you like to have high priority things on top, it will persist in order for you if you like to do it that way. If you like to have long running things on top, or if you like to cascade them in a certain way, it is nice to see that. So anyway, go ahead and set these up however you'd like them. You can go ahead and drag or contract them however you'd like them to be. It is generally pretty good, but sometimes I do find myself fighting with it, not stopping on the right column. But anyway, once I've got some features out here, I go back to the program roadmap, and it's going to show me roughly across the time frame of my PI when I think I'm going to be doing development. So the next part of this is actually going to be taking the stories that are in the individual team backlogs and plotting out where they might actually do their work and doing some work with dependencies. I'm going to pause really quickly because William has pinged me here. He's asking, does it handle multi-person editing?
Yes.
That is a really great question. I've honestly never tested it, but I'm willing, I don't gamble, but I'd be willing to make a bet with you that it's going to be the last one in wins. And that's just because of the nature of the way this app is designed. Just because whatever you've got on your screen, if it's not live refreshing from the database, if you send a change even after somebody else does, it's going to overwrite their change. But since you asked, we'll need to set up a test for this. So thank you, but I don't have an actual scientific answer.
This program, but this is running right on top of Jira.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking about using this for our PI, like when we're putting together the program board. So all the teams would be looking at this and basically taking all the features per team and plotting them in to one of the.
How how do we do with dependencies visually?
Yeah.
So I'll send it back to it. But this is right on top of Jira, just like, I don't know if you ever open a board and if you're making edits, it says this is changed, you refresh it. So that's, and I think what Nick was just alluding to, like, if you both change the same element at the same time, then the one to get the latest copy is the one that's just going to make it. But Nick, why don't you? I think dependencies is at a lower level, right? So that's coming.
Yep, I'm glad you guys are excited. I'm excited too, because we're going to jump into dependencies next. So the very next thing that we do after we plot where we think our features are going to go is we go into the actual roadmap for this. Oops, sorry. We go into the actual increment. And now this is where we can start to get really fun. So what you see here is the familiar set of features that we brought in. They're plotted out on what sprint we think that we're going to be doing the work. And now I've got my individual teams here. So these are the individual boards that we brought in when we defined the art. So we have to do a bit of an annoying step of initializing this. So I have to click on each board, see their stuff, and then come back to the screen. So this is the only time you have to do it. But basically, this is where we actually take the sprints that belong to the individual team boards and map them to the actual program increment. So we've already gone ahead and defined those sprints, and these actually live in the individual team boards. So the nice thing to do, and this will be a bit of a manual step, is you'll want to make sure that there's congruence between the teams in terms of the naming convention they use for sprints. It's just going to make everything easier for reporting. There is not really an easy way to enforce that. There's nothing available right now for it, but it is something that you at least want to make sure that you get roughly similar. But anyway, after we do that for team 1, I'll do the same thing for team 2, team 3, and team 4. We'll set up all of their sprints. If it ever gives me a save button. Refresh it. There we go.
We're loading, we're telling the app about the sprints that each individual team has as part of the PI. He's kind of configuring it all. That's the one.
Yeah, we're basically providing the infrastructure for Cadence. So this is what's allowing us to have a single program increment mapped to 4 individual teams that have their own boards and their own workflows and everything. So what we've got right here, I didn't do anything yet for team 1, but oops, not that. I cannot click things. You guys seeing that?
Yeah, not yet.
I don't think it's a proper link. Anyway, I'll go to that other board to do it. But anyway, the reason you're not seeing issues for team 1 and team 4 is they haven't moved any issues into their sprints yet. So we'll go ahead and do that in just a second. But nonetheless, what you're seeing here between teams 2 and 3, they have these 5 stories slated for sprint 1, these 5 stories slated for sprint 2, so on and so forth. So these can actually be moved around if you go into the actual boards. If you want to move something from one sprint to another, you can actually manage it in this spot. So if you are considering how you would use this for PI planning, this would be a very, very nice thing to be able to do, is to flexibly move things around. So a use case for this would be, you could actually be here adding issues. So as you and your team are filling out the backlog, you can add new stories, new tasks, anything you guys would like. Right to a sprint right from here. It's very quick and very easy to do. You could also do it optionally right from the team board if that's your favorite place to work, and then you just refresh the page and it'll show up in here. So once you kind of have things where you think that they're going to be and the teams start to go and work on dependencies, this is where things start to get really fun. I can go in here and I can look at any team as a starter, and I can conflate team 3's work with any other team's work at any combination. Oh, William, I see there's a question.
You got a half duplex phone. That's the thing, right? Sorry. No, a question there. There's a question here, please.
Yeah, do you have the capability to lock that view down so that only your team can move your user stories around? Because I would lose my mind if somebody moved my team. Somebody from outside of my team is moving over. Yeah.
I'm surprised, because that's the new thing that everybody's doing now, is you just get to mess with everybody else's stuff. No, I'm just teasing. It's absolutely possible, and it's actually very easy. It's built into Jira natively, so if you don't have permissions to schedule issues or rank issues in somebody else's backlog, you will not be able to move them from one sprint to another unless it's your project.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's all related to the permission scheme, and it's absolutely baked in, as so long as you configure it so. So anyway, what we're looking at here, this is just Team 3's board. I want to look and see, because maybe Team 3 is my front-end team, and I need them to do work, with the back-end team, or maybe vice versa. Maybe we need the back-end team to do some work to make it available for the front-end team. So I want to put these two teams together so we can look at this. I'm going to look at here with Team 2. And let's just say I want to filter these down to see just an individual feature. I want to see just things that are related to donate. So you can see these are the 4 stories related to that. If I wanted to look at just administration, I don't have a really good example where 2 teams have the same one, but nonetheless, you can filter this down to just look at an individual feature on your roadmap. But nonetheless, if I determine that, let's just say that this update database table is going to be dependent of maybe this one here. As a user, I'd like to be able to sign up for recurring donations with a credit card. So I can drag this on top of that, and it will create a link between the two. So a green line is just showing that this is a healthy dependency. It just shows that the dependent story, the first one, is actually slated to be completed in sprint 1. Obviously, the next one is slated for sprint 2, so we're good. If they show up in the same sprint, it shows you that you are at risk. And if it shows up sometime after, it shows that this is a bad dependency and that you need to do something.
Yeah.
So now, what if we want to set up dependencies across teams in different parts?
Yeah, so if you want to do it across arts, it's just a matter of getting creative with how you set up your board. Now, for instance, you can do this program to represent just an art, but you could have it for maybe an art of arts, or maybe a solution train if you wanted to do it that way. I totally just made up art of arts. Let's just pretend I didn't say that. But no, if you had a solution train, all you'd want to do is create a brand new project for your solution train, have the underlying filter for the board bring in all of the stuff from your individual Agile release trains, and then you would plot out your capabilities rather than your features on this program increment, and then you'd bring in the features like you're bringing in at the teams. So it's kind of like adjusting your locus on that, and you'll be able to bring in whatever you need. And you could also have a solution train program board like this, coexisting alongside of a normal art board or an art program like that.
So from a safe perspective, that's what's referred to as a solution train, where multiple trains come together to deliver the broader thing. So we need to build that structure, that construct, and then you can define those relationships. But right now, the train is the unit. It's at the program level only. So, but if we built that solution layer in between, sorry.
There's teams that kind of sit outside the trains.
Right.
Like shared services.
I couldn't quite hear I couldn't hear what the question is.
The comment was that since we have shared services trains, then that is something that we need to look into how to support that concept, but that is something that's in place today.
Yeah, so this is Dan Texera. So we have to be careful upon the usage of a solution train because we are not at this point going to be a holistic solution train with all of the additional kind of rigor to it. What we have to do is there's some dependencies across release trains which we'd have to figure out, and then there are a series of shared service teams which within the planning we would have to have some prior alignment planning to make sure that everyone's aligned up, and then in the future. So with the rollout of this, are we thinking first to solve the release train kind of dependencies, or are we looking to solve the holistic with the initial implementation?
I think Dan, what we're looking at in here is like there's dependencies within a train, and then there's going to be the cross train dependencies, and I think they're looking at how they can map and see the cross train dependencies. So I think basically it sounds like it's not that if we use that solution train recommendation that's being made here, it's more of essentially organizing the teams under one large the trains of trains or whatever, so that you could do that cross train mapping. It's just a way of organizing to see the so that you can do that dependency across the different trains and shared services.
Yeah,
So
but
I think that's more around like how we organize the content.
Yeah, we'd have to just look at that, Eva, because we're not going to introduce another level of the backlog. So we're not going to introduce capabilities.
Right.
So we have to make sure that we could do this without doing that. So it's all good. That we'll just have to have those discussions to make sure that we could do it with the current limitations that we're working through.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let me. I think maybe that could be a follow up that we could do in a smaller group.
While I have Mike, Kyle, you're doing a great job, by the way. Or Nick, excuse me. I don't know why I said Kyle. Nick, you're doing a great job. One question I had is when do we commit to features? Because the top thing I think wasn't a commitment, correct? Is there a section where you actually commit to features?
Yeah, there's no mechanism in here to do anything like that. For instance, like saying that this is going to be part of, or this feature will be done by the end of this program increment or something like that, because you can actually have these span multiple PIs. The way that I've done that actually is by associating a feature with a release version at the program level. So I've typically set up a program to follow one product. At least that's just the way that I've done it in the past, where I'll put all of the versions on the roadmap for that product or any kind of sub products that are released independently as artifacts, and those go inside the program level. So I can assign a feature to that and say it's going to belong to a release.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is John. I would just chime in and say that I think the important thing here is this shows you the breadth of a relatively simple solution that just kind of has the hierarchy necessary. You may not be able to take advantage of it right now. Might not be ready for it. But the idea is that it's not dictating the way of working per se. You can see how you could choose to put things on here to commit at your own. You can even create new ones on the fly. So I think it's important just to see the capability and that it's pretty flexible.
Hear, hear. So by and large, that's really what I wanted to show you guys for the demonstration today. Was really just to show you how you can actually take pretty much out of the box solution with a couple of basic apps and keeping things as simple as possible while gaining a lot of flexibility. Some additional things that would really bolster this and make it better would be some additional reporting and more depth on things like your actual dependencies or even some insights to go along with that. For instance, like what are the dependencies actually costing you? Are you guys doing better in terms of trending and managing your dependencies? Are excessive dependencies causing delays in releases and things like that? We're actually working on some report ideas to solve some of these things. And we actually just this morning saw a very nice demo from another new product that's solving a lot of these problems too. So I think as we iterate on this solution, some of those things would be interesting to explore as well. So I will stop yapping and kindly ask if there are any questions, if there's anything else I can get into.
Is it possible to, I guess, know to the same sprint dependency and then changes it to yellow? Is there, I guess, a way to see that changed?
Apologies, I believe you cut out a bit in the middle of your question. Could I ask you to start over, please?
Yeah. Is there a way, is there like a notification or some, whoever's managing this board would know that if a story got moved to created a same sprint dependency? Is there a way to, like, that there's an alert about that, or would we just kind of need to see that in the board?
Yeah, we'd need to go through and test it and see what it would look like in terms of behavior if you had multiple people live changing. But like, for instance, if they had a toast notification or something come up, we'll be able to test that. We could ask you. We also have a pretty good relationship with the product owner for this product. So anything that we find that would be a shortcoming of this that they haven't built yet, we could also ask them about it.
So this is like a basic implementation. So we are looking at the interfaces to implement any customized reporting dashboards
Yeah, so I think ultimately the question, Nick, is centered around like how could we use this, and that might be the follow up. But how could we use this from like a PI tracking and management beyond just initial planning? And it's sort of I think we can explore that.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, this is really just a visual tool. You know, it's extremely lacking in terms of management functions, and I mean that's just me being completely honest with you. You know, and that's honestly Jira too. It's very good for quick transactional things. It's really good for visualization, representation of things. But in terms of actual management, you know, you're still going to have to rely pretty heavily on a combination of different things. This is an example of one particular tool that you'll be able to use to see where things are. For instance, it's not showing very easily in here, but with the colors, you can see that these are the blue colors over here on the right side. This is intended to show a status category. So at any given time during a PI, you should be able to go in here and look and see in terms of what the status looks like on these. So as things start to get later on into the PI, you'll actually be able to see that some of these are either in progress or they're starting to close. As you guys start to get additional dependencies, you know, this is obviously going to start to look more cluttered, but there is no ability to say like, show me what my dependencies look like as of this time, but 1 week ago today, you know. There's, yes?
When, say, story number 1072 under Team 2 board, say at the end of sprint 1, it wasn't closed and it went into sprint 2, what would that look like? Would it show on both of those sprints then?
No, it's just going to show you that it's in sprint 2. So think of it, it's a live view of transactional data. There's nothing historical that's persisted. There are no facts or anything that it could draw upon to have that.
But it pulls on that field, the sprint field, and that sprint 1 is still in that sprint field because it does show multiple sprints in that field. So it might still do that. What would be interesting is to see as I believe that this program board is a great management tool, especially for Scrum of Scrums, when you have teams as they're going through the PI and they see that some of these dependencies have shifted and turned red, then they have to figure out how are they going to adjust their plans. So I find value there.
I think this is Eva just jumping in. I think maybe what we can do is kind of outline what are those different kinds of combination of what we would do to see that. So if we are looking at a snapshot in time, I think we figure out what we want our reports to be, and we have a reporting cadence, and we're able to go back and say, okay, at this point, it was this, now we say it changed to that. But we're not looking at version history or going back and saying, how did that move? I think for managing it live, there's this. I just to know, because I don't recall if I just saw it here in this demo, but I remember seeing it before, when you do create the dependency in the actual ticket, it actually shows the link and the dependency, just as if you were to go into a ticket and, you know, attach dependency to another. So there is that as well that will be that you can use. But I think the visual here, you know, does get us to a much further point than we are now. Oh, it looks like there's a note from Bonnie as well.
Put the subscriptions. Yeah. I think one of the
Oh, okay. So there could be notification. Bonnie's saying that we could do notifications when there are changes. So if we're saying, well, you know, say we need that, we need the Scrum Master and RTE to know that something has changed, we can have that set up.
Yeah, you can define filters and subscribe to them in general. But I think in general, I think the conversation is more around how will we use it to maintain and track the PI once it's launched. And I think that's definitely something we can talk about further. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Anything that wanna?
Yeah, even without this solution for Agile trains, release trains, filter subscriptions are probably one of the most powerful things you can use in Jira. So if your release train engineer needs to know that somebody's changed a sprint or changed a linkage or of some sort, or changed story points or whatever, you can filter for those changes to be happening and then have it notify them. It's really valuable.
Any questions, comments? How are we doing time?
William, since we have Scriptrunner, we are hoping to add this to the next phase then for the notifications.
Okay. Yeah, and some of the notifications are going to be standard, even, standard Jira capabilities. But
Yeah, I think it would look that gathering some requirements for recording, notifications.
yeah.
Everything we've seen is better than
Oh, thank you. That's really good. No, as I said, I think that's, as I said, we talk about how to organize, how to distribute the work, how to plan.
If there's no other questions and we have a few minutes, I think it might be good to highlight what are the next steps to just make sure we have the team supported to get set up for the next PI, just considering that there's a few weeks of holiday where people will probably be out. So I want to make sure that we have that identified, what we need to do on our side and what the trains need to do on their side. Does that sound good? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just thinking. No, I think probably the next thing that we should do is plan to actually start getting some feedback on this, since it's actually implemented in the development environment. Everybody should be able to at least look at it. I figured that we might need some FaceTime, to talk about some things, or if you guys have some additional questions. So might be good to set up some kind of a session where we could do that. But ultimately, what we'll want to do is just make sure that we get a chance to review any of the projects at the team level and see if there are going to be any epics or anything in there. Chances are you guys will probably know that right away. But really the next part of it would just be installing the necessary configuration. We've actually documented all of that and put it in your Confluence page. So with regard to the smooth configuration management, I don't think that'll be a problem. And then basically just adding on to the different layers.
Nick, hang on. I think, did we lose the room?
I think we did. That's what William said.
Yeah, it looked like it was frozen. In that case, I'll suggest that we can send out notes to confirm the any other questions. Nive, are you on?
Yes, I just wanted to add, it's also about populating to the data with the actual data that we have in prod. So we will also be taking feedback once we have that data inside the dev environment.
When do we know when that will be in dev?
Yeah, so I mean it's pretty much ready. We just wanted to confirm with the feedback and then incorporate the database. So from tomorrow.
Okay. I mean, we can see if there's any other feedback that would prevent us or need to hold. Otherwise, we can move that. We might want to spell out the timing for everybody so we can say at this point, then it's going to be in dev. At this point, we move to prod. Just a question on that. I think we would, how are we, I might have missed earlier on in our planning. When we move to prod, like the teams ultimately would be working on this in prod, right?
Yes, correct.
Yes. It's just to show it in dev if people want to play with it and have questions.
Yes.
Okay.
We want to promote it after we collected all the feedback.
Okay, great. So we can put so let's say we put some data in dev, give the team a couple of days to go in there and gather any other feedback, and then give a timeline for that to say at this date we're going to go into prod. And working backwards from the date, I would probably say we want to go into prod. I will confirm with the teams, but we probably want to be in prod sometime during the week of January 6th to give them a little bit of time to prep. But I don't want to go all the way up to the end, because if they need to do any sort of the setup of setting up the program boards and so forth, they probably want to have a head start on that during that week.
All right, we're back. Sorry. Zoom popped up, but we're here. I think some of the commentary in the room here is about, okay, how can we kind of tee up some of the changes to the teams, make sure that we are kind of know ahead of time what the impact might be. so that come the 13th, things are run smoothly. We might
have a mock PI.
Yeah, I think we were saying maybe putting some of the teams, the scrum masters and the PO, like putting some of them together in a room and basically doing like a mock PI of how it would go during like the actual session. And just being conscious of the change that's happening on the branding or experience train if that goes through. That's additional prep work. So just being conscious of the time needed for the teams already. So for on top of it, it's just.
I think it's a good idea. Nive and the team here, and when we were just cut off, we were just talking about how to get this in place. What we could do is get the data, some data into Dev, so you could actually do the mock in Dev if you want, so that we can gather the other feedback before we move everything to prod, in case there's any other changes we need to make. And then I would say you want to have it in prod sometime during the week of January 6th with enough time to prep for the PI on the 13th. So, you know, working backwards, we should consider that. Does that sound good? So if we get the data to Dev, we'll have a small session to do a mock PI, get the feedback, and then by, say, January 6th, we're coming back in and getting this to prod?
Yeah, I think we can give you like whatever test data you need right away, and then I don't know in terms of people leaving when we would do that. Yeah, maybe like I'm back the second, so I can do it second.
I would suggest either the second or the third.
Yeah, before the week of the 6th. Yeah. Does that sound okay for timing?
To have Dev ready for you by January 2nd?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, Nive, what do you think?
Yeah, that's completely possible. I'm just going to say it would be really great if we can get the link to the data you guys want to use. So we're not importing everything. We can, since it's just Dev, we could just import the epics or features that you prefer. Or we could just import everything either. That's completely fine too.
So do you, in terms of like the data points, you need the features, you want some Kanban for individual teams?
Yes, for the trains.
Okay, we can give like,
we can give the project name.
Yeah. Okay, so we can send that today.
All right.
If you guys want to send it to me, I'll send you the names of the boards.
Okay. All right, great. So data sent today, Dev ready on January 2nd, mock PI done January 2nd through January 3rd. Feedback given by then. I think we just need to look at the feedback and see by January 6th, can we be going to prod or what time during that week? If we could also have a question for the trains, how much time for the real PI would you need for brand experience? So you're working backwards from the 13th, how many days would you want to just get your program boards and everything set up?
We'd be building the program board during, like that's when we're assigning all stories.
Oh, sorry, you're cutting in and out.
We would build the program board during the PI, Allison's saying. But I think
would you do like shells first, like a shell of something so it's ready?
Yeah, and I think the epics, make sure everybody knows what they're doing. We'd have to have the epics and the features.
Really just the epics, and then the teams need to be able to create the stories and be able to move the epics around.
Yeah, I think like a mini fake one, like do your first hour of planning using the new tool, simulated, so if there's any issues with it before the PI there, before the PI identified.
I think we can go through like the logistics of each day and assign like what you do and like what touches the tool. Right. Kind of like what we did.
And like kind of simulate. Yeah, basically there's like 2 weeks, so we should meet on January 2nd.
Hello, this is Bonnie. I'm having trouble following everything that's happening in the room.
So basically, we've been talking about the plans for how to, working backwards from the 13th, when we need to have some kind of mock PI ready.
Right.
As right at the beginning, first
Right.
days of the next year, so we can get some of the teams ready to go for the actual PI.
Yeah, I followed that much. What I want to point out, though, is that I wanted to ask the question because I'm not sure. Are the teams currently using epics as features, or are they currently using epics as epics in Jira?
Epics as features.
They are currently using epics as features.
Yep.
Some
Okay.
are also using epics as epics, but I think for everything in the next PI, that's not happening. So they'll be using epics as features.
But right now, they're using epics as epics.
They're using both. They're using it in both ways right now.
We're doing some cleaning up.
Yeah.
There'll be some adjustments. As
We
it
should
goes
only
on.
be, like, for the mock and for the test, we should only use epics as features.
So yeah, that's a pretty big change for people sometimes to understand and swallow. So you'll want to take that into account in your change management plans to communicate your.
I'm sorry.
It's a little hard to hear the team members in the room.
We're on a cell phone, so if we could just limit to one person at a time, and I'll pass the data around. Matt, did you want to say something? Anyone down the other end?
Prioritize epics as features. We don't need to support or figure out how to use epics as epics.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're in agreement on that one.
Ava, I just had a thought. The timeline sounds aggressive. Not sure how much feedback or the critical feedback necessary from doing it in dev. What if we do it in dev and do it in prod? Or not do it in dev at all, just get ourselves ready in prod as soon as, because there's the holidays, January, right? I mean, that's kind of like, oof, it's getting tight. So just part of me wondered how much value we would get out of doing it in dev. And if not, it was
Actually, I would like to take that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a request. The dev is what we were
You mean
showing you.
the mock
This
again?
is in dev what we showed you today.
Yeah, but
This is
there's
our Okay, but can we do, like, if we give?
Well, let's just see,
Okay.
what's Nive's input on that, sorry. Because I think Nive was about to speak to why if we could skip dev or not.
So yeah, thanks, Eva. So the main reason we're actually using dev is because we have another initiative in getting dev
We're upgrading
with data center. We have extra nodes that's ongoing. We don't want to get it directly to production because that will affect the work that's being done for production to be clustered. And we like to we don't want to stop either of the initiative because they both are equally important. So this work can keep ongoing on dev while that's still being clustered and it's at 90%. And if we put it on production, production is still being upgraded to data center. So while dev is still available completely for this use. So actually, there's another factor that's coming in this initiative.
So does the DC upgrade need to happen before we can use it on January 12th?
That's the plan to have it happen anyways, because they're parallel path right now. That's
But-
why he was saying that the current dev, there's a separate instance being set up for DC. Just to make sure
So I
that-
think then for the teams, we can just use, like, we can walk through and train them on, like, and do the mock PI and train the teams on dev.
On dev,
knowing
yeah.
that
And then
they're currently
it'll be pretty transparent to you guys whether or not you're using dev or prod at that point. It's really more like, this is ready for you on dev. Why don't you give us the data, then support that over.
We need to make sure everyone has access to that.
I like to add one point, like, so whether it's dev on prod or whatever the data center work, it's not going to be something that's going to be visible to the end user.
Yeah, it's
just that it's a decision made to get both ongoing and up to speed.
Maybe, I guess there was a question, Christelle, whether or not there's like access to dev that needs to be granted to these teams to be able to use
Yeah,
this as
so
part of-
so we do have a lot of folks on Jira Dev, but if this is something that is the first time, then please put in an AM ticket saying access to Jira Dev for they're not already in crowd, because it does require them to be added to a crowd group.
There's a separate. Basically, you just need to put in an access request to get access to that. It'll probably be the same.
I think even for like the mock, if it's just the 4 of us.
I'm gonna paste the link, so if you can't access that, then please put in a ticket.
And we have access already. Yeah. So it's gonna be you can.
And most folks have access already. Maybe I think just a few first to add to have access.
So does this mean that, so we've been doing a lot of cleanup on production for our projects. Does that mean we have to now go back and do the same thing, or are we gonna do
A refresh?
Yeah.
I think Dev, we should treat as Dev and continue to do the cleanup on prod, but we're just gonna go through like the mechanics.
Yeah, it's like a training space.
We shouldn't, like, it should be like story 1, story 2, like not actual.
Yeah.
And we just kind of go through the
No,
work.
I say because right now, on Dev, I don't know if they did a split out of all of our projects. Our project fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
Jira on production, it's not on Dev.
Oh, but we're gonna use mock projects as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's not gonna be
one
like
to
foundation
two-
modernization.
Yeah, it's just so you
David
get clear.
project, Matthew project, yeah. Just like so we
we're gonna
go
have to use
through,
real project. Okay.
just to go through ways of working.
All right.
Yeah.
So you wanna do
Okay.
it on Thursday?
Okay, why don't I'd like to suggest that maybe the team here, we go back and look at the timelines and back this up, and so that we can give these guys the direction on what can happen on what dates, so that, you know, everyone's clear and we're not wasting
Yeah,
time.
obviously, because,
Yeah, because there's some things that maybe you have to do and her team,
Yeah.
so, and, you know, these
Yeah, they
activist
let us
teams.
know, 'cause, yeah, there's-
So let's align the stars in
We'll
the
do that.
sky.
Okay.
And then,
I think everyone's just,
yeah.
I think everyone's just eager to get.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But
that's-
I
That's
think
loud and clear.
it's a toy.
Loud and clear.
Like a toy.
All right.
All right. So I think everyone's happy. Thank you, Nick, for your demo. Thanks to the activist team for driving forward. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you